So welcome to a very special edition of 5 Live Boxing. Now, in Las Vegas this weekend, one of the most eagerly anticipated and wanted and dreamed about trilogies will take place between Gennady Golovkin and Saul Canelo Alvarez. It's at the T-Mobile in that twinkling city of lights. What a place to be for a trilogy. Anyway, on this show, we'll hear from Eddie Hearn, the promoter of the fight. He'll talk about the rivalry, and then we'll talk about that fight. Yes, that fight, Tyson Fury against Anthony Joshua. It's been about 2 weeks of it now. We were told it was made, and then it's gone quiet. Then it went quiet again. Then we were told it was definitely made. Well, who knows? Eddie Hearn, once again, will give us his opinion of what's actually happening. And I'm joined to talk me through this list of events by former WBC super middleweight champion. Yes, one of the belts on the line when Golovkin fights Alvarez will be the WBC super middleweight belt. That man is, of course, Richie Woodhall. Now, the reason why I built up the T-Mobile and the twinkling lights and Las Vegas was quite simple. Because right now, along with about 30 officials and 1 or 2 people doing a check weigh-in, Richie and I are in an empty York Hall, one of the greatest venues in world boxing history. This should be a heritage site. This should be a place where people pay pilgrimage to come and see Rich. Now, Richie, first of all, before we talk about Golovkin and Alvarez, and before we talk about Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua, just give me one York Hall memory. We can do that. Give me one York Hall memory as we stand here in the balcony looking down on the ring.
A York Hall memory for me was when Audley Harrison actually fought here. And
stand to attention when you say his name.
And it all kicked off in the crowd, if you remember.
I do.
And I always remember that because I think
Hyde
it was Herbie Hyde, all kicked off in the crowd. It was chaos, but Steve, what I remember about it most of all, it was sweltering.
Yeah, it was.
It must have been 40 degrees in here. It was an incredible occasion. But that's what sticks in my mind because of the crowd, the heat, and it got heated obviously with the exchanges between the two of them. And yeah, that for me sticks out in my memory.
Richie, I've got to go straight to this fight in Las Vegas. 20,000 people are going to be at the T-Mobile. It's the third fight. The first one in 2017 was a draw. The second one in 2018 was won by Alvarez. There were people, and there are people, that believe that Golovkin won both of them. He hasn't got the decision yet, and it moves to this fight. What's your overriding memory, Golovkin and Alvarez?
2 cracking fights, but for me, I actually agree with Golovkin in that he's an undefeated fighter, in my opinion. He's 42 1-1, remember, and that one defeat is against Canelo Alvarez. But for me, he wins the fight, the second fight, that is. Probably even more convincingly than he did the first one. Yeah. They're both convincing victories, but the second one, I thought he won that one also. So yes, my overriding memory of both fights is that Golovkin, as he should be the winner on both occasions.
Now, both of those fights were for various middleweight world titles. At this moment in time, Golovkin's got a couple of the middleweight belts, and of course, Saul Canelo Alvarez has got 4 of the super middleweight belts. Belts he won against unbeaten fighters, that great run. Callum Smith, unbeaten fighter. Billy Joe Saunders, unbeaten fighter. Caleb Plant, unbeaten fighter. He's got those. It's in the past, Golovkin has been, reluctant to discuss even moving up to super middle. This one's at super middle, 8 pounds heavier. You made that transition all those years ago, Rich. You went from a Keith Holmes middleweight world title fight up to fighting for the WBC super middleweight title fight. A little fight in the middle. Will that be in Canelo's favour, the shift in weight, or Golovkin's favour, or in neither one of theirs' favour?
It's a tough one, Steve, actually, because you're right. Golovkin is an out-and-out middleweight. He's comfortable. He's like the old Marvin Hagler, who just stayed at middle all his career. Yeah. You know, all those world title fights that he had. Golovkin is the same. But at the same time, Alvarez, although he's the super middleweight champion, if you look at both boxers, Golovkin is probably suited better physically to super middle than Canelo is at super middle, because I think Golovkin is naturally the bigger man.
Yeah, his dimensions.
Yes,
yeah, okay,
he looks a bigger man, and he probably, like I said, he's probably suited to the super middleweight division better than Canelo Alvarez is, to be quite honest, although it's Alvarez that is the undisputed champion. So, yeah, it's a crazy situation, but Golovkin, I think he will take to it like a duck to water, no real problems, because of the opponent that's in front of him is more or less the same size or a little bit smaller.
And do you anticipate this being basically round 25? They've done 12 rounds, they've had 24 rounds, and at least 15 of those 24 rounds have got memorable highlights. Every single one of the 24 rounds has been brilliant. I was talking to Barry Jones about this earlier in the week. Do you anticipate that once it goes ding ding inside the T-Mobile in front of that rabid crowd, do you anticipate it literally being round 25? Is that your gut feeling, Rich?
Yeah, too right it is, Steve. I actually watched the second contest again this morning, and again, Golovkin wins it for me, but it's a difficult fight for both boxers, and I'll tell you why it's a difficult fight for Golovkin, Steve, is because he seems to have the longer reach, he's got a better jab, and you would expect him to try and keep his distance and keep the man at bay. But that's what Canelo Alvarez lives off. He lives off a sloppy jab. He lives off a fast right-hand counter when the jab comes out. So it's difficult to actually keep Canelo Alvarez, at distance and at bay behind your jab.
Easier said than done.
Oh, it's easier said than done. It's all right you saying, well, Golovkin's got a great jab, he should be able to keep his man at distance.
It doesn't work that way.
It doesn't work like that, because Alvarez is such a strong fighter, and he lives off a sloppy jab or a fast right-hand counter around that jab. He gets round it, and so to keep him at bay, Steve, behind the jab is difficult, very difficult indeed.
Now, the man who's promoting this is Eddie Hearn, and I caught up with Eddie and I put it to him, and he was in a really excited state. You'd have loved it, Rich. He was playing Eddie, the fight fan. So the first thing I asked Eddie was, Eddie, I can tell from your face, but you were obviously up at 5 a.m. for these two fights, watching them with me on TV.
I was watching it as a fan, really. I can't believe we're standing here about to promote the trilogy. Two modern day greats. I mean, the first fight was epic. Canelo Alvarez chose to do the right thing, which was box and move, and it was a very close fight. And the second fight, he came out and decided to walk down Gennady Golovkin. And the punishment they both took in those fights was incredible, how they were both standing and, just pinching yourself yesterday at the lobby of the MGM Grand to see these two getting ready to collide. Thousands of fans, already making their way into the resort to watch this fight at the weekend. And it really is one of the great rivalries of modern day boxing. Two modern day greats, the undisputed super middleweight world champ, the unified middleweight world champ. And I really believe this will be the best of the three so far.
It's an interesting thing because the two of them, Soul's only 32 or whatever, but he seems like he's been around forever, 60-odd fights. Golovkin's 40 years of age, and they've had between them about 50 world title fights. Do you think, Eddie, in 10 years' time, 15 years' time, or 20 years' time, you'll ever promote fights like that with guys that have had that many fights? Because the way it works, look at Joshua's quick career, Josh Taylor's quick career. Everyone's on speeded up careers now. They're not going to, in years to come, guys are not going to have 50 fights, 60 fights, and 25 world titles, are they?
I think the difference with Canelo Alvarez, he's been pro since he was 16 or something like that, from the 15, from the streets of Guadalajara, making his way. I think he was like 20-0 before he had a serious fight. And I think nowadays you're under so much pressure to fast track your career through fans, through broadcasters, and through the desire of fighters as well. So I don't think we'll necessarily see another Canelo Alvarez. He's quite amazing, in everything that he's done. And he's bouncing back here. People are talking about if he was to suffer defeat on Saturday, it'd be back-to-back defeats to Bivol and Gennady Golovkin. And it would be a very quick demise from sort of that invincibility that everybody believed he had in the sport. So there's a lot of pressure on him, but he's really fired up.
Now, Eddie, you've been working closely with him, and you've seemed to have got a friendship. You and him exchange pajama tops, but and tips on fancy Italian silk, bed clothing, which is lovely. I love that side of you, I really do. But when did he start to talk about this Golovkin third fight, or is it something he's always talked about, Eddie?
I just said to him, when we started working together, the first thing that he wanted to do was to become undisputed champion. And within 12 months, he did it. It was incredible. He beat Callum Smith, he beat Billy Joe Saunders, he beat Caleb Plant. 3 undefeated fighters, all champions, and he dethroned them all. He became undisputed. And I sort of said to him, look, the biggest fight out there for you is Gennady Golovkin. Oh, and they can't stand each other, Buncey. So they don't even really talk about that fight. So I said, but would you consider it? Oh, he doesn't want to fight me and this and that. And I said, well, look, if we can get it together, we should try and look at it. And in the meantime, he wanted to go up and fight Dmitry Bivol. And he got to a point, I think, where he was like, outside of Gennady Golovkin, who can beat me? So therefore, I've got to go up ridiculously to 175 pounds and try and beat a champion up there again after doing it against Sergey Kovalev. He came unstuck that night, but we'd already agreed a deal to fight Bivol and Gennady Golovkin. And the good thing about boxing now, Bunce, is actually, although he's coming off a defeat, it actually doesn't affect the size of the Gennady Golovkin fight. In all honesty, it makes it more intriguing. So I think that now he's in a position where he's probably in the biggest fight of the sport this weekend. And, where does he go from here? Because all he wants to do is challenge himself. And it's remarkable that this young man from Guadalajara, who used to sell ice pops out of his dad's truck, still has the hunger that he had at that age. You see, like with everything that he's got, with all the money, with all the belts, with all the Bugattis, with all the houses, like he's a true competitor, a modern day great. And Gennady Golovkin, people also need to understand, I'm telling you, up at 168 pounds, this fight is going to really suit Gennady Golovkin, right? He's been making 160 for like 16 years. You saw him against Murata, great win, but he started to look a little bit deflated on the scales. He's going to have more of an engine. He's going to have more zip and power in his punches. And Canelo's got to be careful, because Canelo says to me and the media, I will only be happy if I'm standing over him, having knocked him out and ended his career. So the sole intention of Canelo Alvarez in this fight is to win by knockout. And I know they both absorbed a lot of punishment in those first, but you cannot keep taking the kind of shots they took in those first 2 fights, because it was brutal.
It's really a strange thing, because the two of them, even though Canelo got the win in the second fight, it's like the two of them are looking for some kind of justice. Canelo's desperate for people to say, you were lucky, you definitely lost the first round, and Golovkin wants the reassurance that he can actually beat this guy. And we talked about that desire, that hunger. I would say going into this fight, they've got as much desire and as much hunger as they had going into the first fight back in 2017.
Yeah, because this time it's personal, really. It's not, I mean, I know the undisputed championship's on the line, and Gennady Golovkin really wants to win that, but it's just personal. Honestly, like, Canelo cannot stand him. Gennady Golovkin says all sorts to the media and rarely says it to his face, but Gennady is a bad man as well. Like, he's very respectful and he's a very nice individual, but trust me as well, he has a bad side about him, and like, you have to be. And where he come from. He's an extremely tough man, and he is desperate to win this fight. Desperate to win it.
That was Eddie Hearn. We'll hear again from Eddie a bit later on when he brings us up to date with Joshua and Fury. I've got to tell you, saying brings us up to date with Joshua and Fury seems to be the kind of thing I'm saying all of the time, to be perfectly honest with you. Richie, one of the simple guidelines to this fight is that Golovkin, at whatever he is, 40, 41, is now too old. Mm-hmm. And that Canelo has left him waiting. Of course, Canelo says, left him waiting. I've wanted to fight him since we left the ring when I got the decision last time. There's an awful lot of anger and hate between these two. What are your feelings, first of all, on Golovkin's advanced age?
Well, Steve, if there's one thing that's going for Canelo Alvarez in this fight, for me, it is Golovkin's age. Remember, it's been 4 years since they last met. And he was a 36-year-old fighter then, was Golovkin. It looked to be in his peak. And for me, again, keep saying it, he's won the fight, didn't get it. He's 4 years older. That has got to be an advantage for Canelo Alvarez. I don't care what anybody says. He's a 40-year-old world champion who is probably with no disrespect, he's probably past his best.
Yeah.
But if there's any time now to beat Golovkin again for Canelo Alvarez, it's now.
Yeah.
He's a 40-year-old fighter, Steve, at the end of the day.
But earlier this year, he goes out to Japan. He wins a version of title against a younger fighter, a bigger fighter, a fresher fighter, a guy fighting at home. He does that. Okay, he wasn't brilliantly impressive, but he still got the win and got the win in start. And I'll tell you one thing I thought about, and I haven't discussed this. I haven't discussed it with anybody, but I think it's really important. When Golovkin can bang, he's hit people with shots and knocked them out. Left, right, body, hip, shoulder, ear. He's hit them with punches. We call those Golovkin punches. Some of those mad punches where he aims up and he brings the shot down behind your guard. Unbelievable. He's caught Canelo Alvarez flush, and he hasn't dropped him.
No,
he hasn't dropped him. And he knows he's in the ring. He hasn't really hurt him. He's stunned him, but he hasn't really hurt him. I'm just wondering if that will be on his mind as he closes his eyes at night. When those eyelids come down, does he see Canelo walking through his punches like he's done in the previous 24 rounds, Richie?
Well, the door, as they say, swings both ways, because Canelo Alvarez is probably thinking exactly the same thing, thinking I've took his best shots and he hasn't put me down.
Yeah.
And he hasn't looked like going down at all. Yes, he's been slightly, I wouldn't say staggered, but, he felt the odd shot here and there, but at no point in any of those two contests did it look like that he was really struggling from the power of Golovkin. So that, like I said, that could be an advantage for Alvarez. I just feel, Steve, like I said, Canelo now at 32 in his prime. Yes, he in many ways will have a point to prove to a lot of people, because a lot of people think that
he's lucky to have a draw and a win. But you say in his prime, Rich, he's had 61 fights.
I know.
He's been going since he was 15. He's had a succession of hard fights. Okay, he can make really hard. I mean, he made beating Billy Joe Saunders look easy. He made beating Caleb Plant in the last few rounds look easy. He beat Callum Smith, who was unbeaten. I know Callum ruptured a tendon, and I know all of that. But those are really good fighters. He knocked out Sergey Kovalev. Okay, I know he got beat by Dmitry Bivol earlier this year. But, Rich, those are not insignificant wins.
No, but, Steve, at the end of the day, Canelo Alvarez, I think he is in his prime and his peak. But against Dmitry Bivol, you've got to remember, I don't think it was because he's at the end of the road. It's because he probably took a step too far in that he went up to light heavy.
Yeah.
And the man isn't a big middle. He's not a big middleweight, Steve.
And against Sergey Kovalev was fresh off that brutal fight where we were ringside in Russia against Anthony Yarde, where he was really hurt. It was a brutal savage war. The fight with, in my opinion, with Alvarez came too soon after that, and Alvarez knew what to do by making him fight and pushing him back and going toe-to-toe. Bad mistake by Kovalev. But Bivol didn't commit any mistakes. He used his brains, his sense, his distance, and he just won it. It was a title decision in some ways, but he won it. Richie, what I find amazing, and I really do find this amazing, here's two men, between them about 50 world title fights, acknowledged as modern greats, the likes that we may not see again. We may not see guys go up and down and have the amount of fights, world title fights these guys have had, and continue to their age in the future. We may not see it. Okay, and Alvarez is as desperate for crazily redemption, even though he won the last fight, as Golovkin is for his redemption and his justice. I find that really odd. Have you ever known a guy?
Well, it is odd, Steve.
Have you ever known a guy who's won a fight, who's so desperate to get back in there to put right? How's that work?
How's that work? So that shows you deep down that he probably feels that he hasn't won those two fights and that he's got something to prove.
He knows in his heart, Richie.
He knows in his heart that he hasn't won them. Okay, the one fight was very close, but for me, Golovkin has won the two fights. And most people, they say that, apart from obviously your Canelo Alvarez supporters, they view it differently. But I think deep down, Steve, he knows he didn't win the fights. Yeah. And that's why he's still got
him, doesn't it?
Yes, it gets to him, and he's still got a point to prove, and that's quite clear and simple.
Well, I am going to get your prediction a little bit later on in the fight. Now, this is one fight. This is a massive fight, and we've got, between now and Christmas, we've got half a dozen others, really big fights, already made, already secured, already guaranteed. But over the last 2 weeks, it's been all about Anthony Joshua fighting Tyson Fury. They've exchanged insults. They've allegedly exchanged contracts. They've agreed on just about everything. Now, before Before I move on to we've got Eddie Hearn talking about it and giving us some stats, some facts and figures. Now, before we get to that, Rich, I've got to ask you. Now, I haven't seen you until you walked up the steps here at York Hall half an hour ago. I haven't seen you since Saudi. And in Saudi, it was a mad dash to get you on that plane at 5 o'clock in the morning.
Was.
We had to send Paddy, the producer, and likely using his F1 skills, honed skills, 142 kilometres an hour. He's already got a ticket for it. Honestly, they've praised him. They got you there just in time, and you flew back.
Yes.
And did it go without any problem? Did you get back safely?
Yeah, I was okay, Steve. I was okay.
6 a.m. in the morning, the dash to get Richie Woodhall. I was still there interviewing Anthony Joshua. I was in the trenches. Richie was in the first class lounge with his legs up, having just a slight touch of caviar. Anyway, Richie, first of all, when the Joshua Tyson Fury fight people started talking about it 10 or so days ago, what was your first reaction? Not your reaction now, your reaction 12 days ago.
Well, I actually thought that Anthony Joshua's career could be over, and when I heard that this contest looks like it's going to be made, I really think that it's a chance for Anthony Joshua, obviously, to get back to be a world champion. It's a fantastic opportunity for him, and you know, Steve, I know there's going to be a hell of a lot of money involved in it, but I should imagine that Anthony Joshua is a very wealthy man anyway, and if Tyson Fury would have turned around to Anthony Joshua and said, listen, I'll give you this fight, but you know, you're not going to get paid any money for it, I wonder if he'd have took it, because if he's a true fighting man, he should have took it, because he knows that this is his last chance now to become that world champion again, and against the ultimate opponent in Tyson Fury. He's at the top of the tree and he's giving him a shout.
You know the mad thing, Rich? Now, you and I have worked together, as we say when we get in a car. We've been 20 odd years, you and I have been together, working for every company under the sun. Some that vanished 10 years ago that no one's even heard of.
We're still going.
We have been there thousands of nights, thousands of hours, thousands of fights. Hand on heart, if someone had said to me, what will Richie's reaction be to the fight? I would have sworn you were going to go, you know what, it's great, but he needs a rest, he needs a break, he's got to come back with a couple of fights. So that's really, and you know what that shows? Do you know what that shows? Because I always tell people this. People say to me, oh, isn't he lovely, Richie Woodhall? He should be on Strictly. I said, no, he's not lovely. I've seen him fight. He's nasty. Nothing to do with dancing. I said, he's nasty. Don't be fooled by him being smiley in a suit. He was really nasty in the ring. And what you showed there was your true fighting colours. Yeah. Get the fight.
No rest, Steve.
I love that.
For Joshua, you know, he's been beaten twice by Usyk, and his career, like I said, it could have been over, couldn't it? Because who's he going to fight? Who was he going to fight apart from a Wilder, which again they said that wasn't going to be made. So Tyson Fury, fair play to Tyson Fury too, and said, yeah, I'll give you a shot at my title. I think, yeah, he should get it on and get back in the gym and let's get this fight on.
Richie, I love that kind of brutality and that simple black and white reasoning. Now, we've heard from Eddie already. Now let's hear from Eddie on the latest Fury and Joshua.
So last week we received an offer, you know, sort of via social media from Tyson Fury, and then later on via George Warren at Queensbury. And Tyson Fury made it pretty clear, you know, 60-40. He wanted a rematch clause. He didn't say that at the time, but, you know, we understand he's a champion. 50-50 in the rematch if AJ was to win. And the fight to take place in November. Obviously, AJ has just literally finished a fight with Alexander Usyk. And I felt that they were just sort of bluffing us, really. So we went back and said, look, Queensbury have got December 17th held at the Millennium Stadium. We would accept that date. We'd like 60-40 in the rematch if we were to win, because you're saying it's because he's champion, etc. And they came back and they said no to all your requests, basically. And if you want the fight, we'll go to December 3rd, but no later. We're not changing the offer. Take it or off you go. And, you know, I wasn't very happy with that. And I wanted to obviously negotiate the terms because I felt some of them weren't quite right. I didn't feel like it was a terrible offer. And I sat down with AJ and he went, take it. He said, I want to fight Tyson Fury. I've signed to fight Tyson Fury before and it didn't happen because of the Wilder arbitration. I know we thought we were coming back with a comeback fight, but if I don't fight him now, I may never get the chance to do so. So we accept. You know, it was, some might call it a calling of the bluff. But it transpires, hopefully, that it's not a bluff. And if it's not a bluff, we accepted these terms in writing last Friday. We know, obviously, through the Queen's pass, and everyone's been respectfully stepping back from negotiations and social media. But on Monday, AJ wanted to say, look, we've accepted the terms, so send us the contract. So we're waiting for the contract from Queensberry. I spoke to George Warren. He assures me that's on the way. And we're ready to go. If Tyson Fury is serious about this fight will happen. And AJ, remarkably, maybe Fury feels like this is the perfect time to fight AJ. He saw his little wobble after the fight, maybe thinks he's lacking a bit of confidence. But AJ's he's cut from a different cloth. He says, look, I want to fight the best. I've always wanted to fight Tyson Fury. And we also know it's the biggest fight in boxing. I mean, it's the biggest ever fight in British. There'll never be another fight like it. And it's a chance for him to regain the world heavyweight title. So it's not ideal because I expected him to come back with a couple of comeback fights. But he wants it. He's ready to accept the challenge. We have done that. And now we await the contract. And hopefully, there's no bad mouthing. We've said to George Warren and those guys, look, let's work together. Let's try and get this over the line. And at the moment, everyone seems to be singing from the same hymn sheet.
Frank Warren said on Wednesday that it was 90% done, 10% left to do. Would that be your understanding of it?
I think the first thing you have to do is, approve and agree the fundamental terms of the deal. And we've done that. So there is the conversation between the broadcasters, obviously BT and DAZN. At the moment, everyone's very proactive and positive to move forward and find a solution, which I don't think is difficult. We've got to receive a contract yet, which we haven't, and we'll have to review that because it could be full of, all sorts. But I don't know. Look, but at the end of the day, it comes down to if people are real, if people want the fight, it will happen. And from our side, AJ has accepted the fight. He's ready to make that fight, and we'll await the contract. But I think Frank's right. I think ultimately it comes down to they assure me from their side, Tyson Fury, George Warren, Queensberry, they want this. And if they want it, we'll get it.
Yeah. And when you say you spoke to AJ, have you sat with him, been in his company, or was that done via telephone call?
No, just by telephone. And he's a fighter, as you know, Bunce. Fighters accept fights, challenges. So you've got to get it right as a team. And it's not just about AJ going, yeah, I'll fight him, because every fighter would say that. It's, will we be ready? How's the hands? Are there any niggles? When would we have to start training camp? How are you mentally after Saudi, and the Usyk defeat? And everything was, look, I'm positive. I feel good. My hands are good. I can still have a couple of weeks off, rest the body, go back into camp. But ultimately, I want this fight. He's wanted to fight Fury for so long. Like I said, he signed to fight Fury. People think that, and again, when you go back over the resume, I've said it a million times. Now you're adding Fury to the run of fights. What more do we have to do to stand up to AJ and say, wow, you're a different breed, mate? In a world of boxing where people and advisors and lawyers like to duck fights and, take easy fights, show me his easy fights since his 15th fight. And now he's coming off the back of 2 Usyk fights straight into a Fury fight. It's incredible, but that's what he's about. And, once the team, the management, everybody around him said, he can do this. He's ready for it, and he'll be in top physical shape, top mental condition for this fight. We were happy to move forward with the challenge, and ultimately, he's the boss. He's the one who's going to call the shots. And he said, if I don't take this now, I may never get the chance to fight Fury, and I want to fight him.
So Eddie there, being as brutally honest as you were, saying, okay, I wanted to negotiate. They didn't want to negotiate. I've still taken it. What's your gut feeling, Rich, on this fight? What's your gut feeling? Do you think we will see it happen this side of Christmas? Not next year. Do you think we will see it this side of Christmas? What's your gut feeling?
My gut feeling is it's going to happen, but I don't think it'll happen this side of Christmas because of the build-up to it. It's just too big a fight. It's still the biggest fight out there in any division. It's probably even bigger than Fury versus Usyk, to be quite honest, from a British public point of view, and that's going to need to be built up. So I think it's going to happen, but I don't personally think it'll happen this side of Christmas. I hope I'm wrong, Steve, because me and you would love to be ringside no matter where it is, but we'll probably will be anyway, but I think it'll be in the new year.
Which I'm not. You're not getting away yet. You will actually have to give me a prediction on Alvarez and Golovkin. But before that, let's hear from a guy called Joe Mikowski. He's the executive vice president of DAZN. He's a very powerful man. You've seen him. The guy, he's got a very sort of entertaining hairstyle. He's a nice guy, Joe. I like to talk to Joe at big events, and I managed to catch up with Joe in Las Vegas and ask him how it's building, what it feels like to be part of a Canelo fight in that great fight city.
This fight has been talked about both, by the media, by the fans. I feel like I've been talking about it internally with promoters and my colleagues for 4.5, 5 years. This is a fight that we have worked on for a long time. It's a long time coming. It's long overdue, but it's shaping up to be a massive, massive night. Every metric we look at, buzz metric, this is the biggest fight I think we've done in the US to date.
Wow.
We've done a bunch of big fights. This one feels the biggest. It's obviously Mexican Independence Day weekend. That adds to it in the Mexican-American community. We're very excited, and I think we'll have a press conference in a couple of hours. These two genuinely don't like each other. There is needle. I'm sure Eddie will be stirring that needle. Which is his job to do. I'll try and stay out of the way of any fisticuffs. But yeah, look, it's a big fight, and we're definitely stepping into a massive, massive DAZN pay-per-view fight weekend.
It's nice to work. I mean, you're in charge. You're in charge, but it's nice to be surrounded by guys like Canelo and Golovkin, such pros, such consummate pros that have been there, that have done it, and it just crackles when they're around, and they just reek of professionalism. That must be a really nice feeling.
They're extremely professional in a number of ways. I mean, they're two Hall of Fame fighters, in my opinion. So their core craft is, they're top class. They're also fantastic business partners and salespeople. They both did 4 or 5 hours of media yesterday, speaking to the boxing badgers like yourself from all corners of the world for 4 or 5 hours. They're fantastically professional. They also, as a result, I think, generate huge interest amongst their fan bases. And that's the reason there's a trilogy fight. There's a lot of disagreement amongst boxing fans as to how the first 2 fights should have been scored. That adds to it. The needle between them adds to it. It hasn't quite bubbled over yet. Let's see what happens the next 36 hours. But look, they're true pros. They are fantastic salesmen. All of the ingredients for a massive fight weekend, are there for us to play with, and we're just very proud to be finally delivering this fight for fans.
So that's Joe Mikowski, EVP at DAZN, talking to me. Now, Richie, before you and I get ready for the boxing here at York Hall, I've been saying it since we started this show. I do need you to tell me how you think Alvarez and Golovkin will play out. It's ding, round 1, round 25. How does that fight go, and how do you think it ends?
Well, I've watched both the first 2 fights recently, Steve, and for me, Golovkin has won them both. They're both great fights. They're very close rounds, some of them. I just tend to think that Golovkin, when he can manage to keep Canelo at distance, he outboxes him. His jab is absolutely vital. And again, when Canelo closes the gap, he works better on the inside. But I think, again, it's going to play out similar to the first 2 fights in Golovkin keeping his distance just that little bit better than what Canelo can in terms of closing the gap. I think Golovkin keeps him at bay and wins on points. But here's the issue, Steve. He wins on points again, but is he going to get it?
Yeah.
And I just, you hope and pray that justice will prevail and the kid will get it. And Steve, I would like to ask you the same question. Who do you think is going to win the 3rd fight?
I think the man that's going to win the 3rd fight is Canelo Alvarez. I think he's going to be too busy. I think he's going to work a little bit faster, and I think it's going to be some really tense, hard rounds, certainly in the first 6 or so. I think he's going to pull away down the stretch, a bit like he did with Caleb Plant, and I think he's going to win it quite clearly by 3 or 4 rounds. And I think there's just a chance that 40-year-old Golovkin might look like 40-year-old Golovkin at the end. But I wouldn't be at all surprised if you're right and I'm wrong. That's the way we do our business, Richie. That's Absolutely. The way we do our business. Richie, thank you very much indeed. York York call is just starting to fill up. More and more people are coming in. The first bell here is probably an hour or so away. The first bell in Las Vegas for the big fight, whether it's round 1 or whether it's round 25, depending on how you look at it, will be live and exclusive on 5 Sports Extra starting at 4:30 in the morning. That's Sunday morning. Well, Saturday night, I suppose, but it's still Sunday morning. Richie Woodhall and Steve Bunce at York Hall. What a venue. One day, Rich, we should just come here and do an entire show on York Hall memories. See you at 4:30 on Sunday. Thanks very much.